If you learn a language from a textbook, you're essentially building flat pack furniture.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. You follow the instructions, step by step, subject, verb, object, and at the end you have this perfectly functional, completely rigid sentence.
But the moment you step outside your front door,
Exactly. That rigid structure just shatters. Someone throws a hyper-specific slang word at you, or, the regional accent completely redirects the airflow of the vowels.
and suddenly those grammatical rules you memorized are just, well, optional.
Yeah, your perfectly built sentence just falls apart. So today, we're doing a deep dive into decoding the living, unspoken rules of English as it's actually functioning out in the wild.
And to do that, we're looking at a deeply revealing stack of sources. We're pulling from this massive academic corpus tracking millions of words of spontaneous unscripted speech.
Which is fascinating on its own.
Right. But we also have phonetic breakdowns of how geography physically alters the shape of our mouths, plus these survival guides for the intense psychological warfare of corporate meetings.
Oh, the corporate stuff is wild. We also have practical manuals for navigating modern logistics, like splitting bills and renting apartments.
Exactly. Because the through line here is that language isn't just a static set of rules to be policed. It's a highly sensitive, dynamic ecosystem.
I love that framing.
Yeah, the microscopic choices we make in our pronunciation and our phrasing,
Yeah.
they reveal the hidden architecture of how we think and, how we desperately try to connect with one another.
Well, let's start with the physical mechanics of those microscopic choices, specifically the divide between American and British English.
Right.
Because reading the phonetic breakdowns in our sources, I realized that changing your accent isn't just about mimicking a sound, it's this secret physical choreography.
It really is. It is entirely biomechanical.
You're actively retraining the muscle memory of your tongue and jaw.
Take the letter R, for example, which is one of the great geographic divides in the English language.
Okay.
In American English, linguists identify what is called the rhotic R. And this requires a really distinct muscular effort.
What does that mean physically?
Well, to produce it, you have to push the body of your tongue up and back toward the roof of your mouth for words like car, worker, or bird.
Oh, wow.
It requires actual physical tension.
It feels almost aggressive when you isolate it, like car, worker. You can actually feel the back of your throat constricting.
Right. Now, contrast that physical tension with standard Southern British English, which uses a non-rhotic R.
Okay, so what's the difference?
There is almost no muscular engagement in the tongue at all. You simply open your mouth, drop the jaw, and let the vocal tract relax.
Ah, like you're at the dentist.
Exactly. So car becomes ka, and worker becomes worko. The consonant essentially evaporates into a prolonged vowel sound.
That's so interesting.
It's physically much softer, requiring far less continuous airflow restriction.
Yeah.
And you see similar shifts with vowels too, like the British broad A in bath or grass, sounding like ah.
Versus the American short A, like in cat or bath.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But the handling of the letter T is probably more dramatic.
Oh, yeah, the T. In American English, if a T lands in the middle of a word, we deploy what linguists call a flap T, right?
We do. We don't actually pronounce the hard consonant.
Right, we say...
The mechanics of the flap T are fascinating because it's fundamentally about evolutionary efficiency in speech.
How so?
Well, to make a crisp, standard British T, you have to completely halt the airflow behind your teeth and then release it in a tiny burst.
Okay.
That takes a fraction of a second of physiological effort. But the American flap T allows the vocal cords to just keep vibrating without interruption.
So the tongue just briefly bounces against the roof of the mouth.
Exactly, turning the T into a D. It's physically lazier, allowing for a faster, more continuous stream of speech.
But the standard British clear T isn't the only alternative either.
Yeah.
Our sources highlighted the London and Essex variation, the glottal stop,
Oh, yes.
which is obviously famous on the internet. The whole meme of saying a bottle of water as a ball of water.
The glottal stop is an entirely different mechanical intervention. Right. Instead of stopping the air behind the teeth, the speaker abruptly closes their vocal cords deep in the throat.
So you don't release the air at all.
No, you choke it off entirely and jump straight to the next vowel. So metal becomes meal.
I always wonder why we care so much about these microscopic shifts in airflow. Like, why does a flap T versus a glottal stop immediately trigger something in our brains?
Because pronunciation acts as a primal auditory fingerprint.
Fingerprint.
Yeah, we're wired to categorize people for survival and social cohesion. In the millisecond you open your mouth, before your listener has even processed the definition of the word you used.
Their brain has already analyzed the airflow of your consonants and vowels.
Exactly. They've instantly mapped your geographic origin, your potential socioeconomic background, your tribal affiliation. It is the fastest, most involuntary cultural sorting mechanism we possess.
That is wild. But if the physical sounds of the language are that fluid and geographically subjective, what about the structural scaffolding?
You mean the grammar?
Yeah. I always assumed the grammatical rules were set in stone. But you brought in this data set from Lancaster University and Cambridge University Press that just completely shatters the idea of a fixed rule book.
Oh, absolutely. We're looking at the Spoken British National Corpus 2014. And this is a monumental linguistic undertaking.
Because they didn't just analyze published books or scripted television, right?
No, they crowdsourced 11.5 million words by having members of the British public, everyone from college students to grandparents, use their smartphones to record their spontaneous everyday conversations.
Wow.
And they did this over 4 years. By removing the observer effect, they captured the language in its rawest state.
And comparing that 2014 data to a similar corpus from the 1990s proves that the grammar is actively mutating.
It is shifting in real time.
Yeah, the most shocking data point to me was the rise of the word used at the very beginning of a sentence.
It's incredible.
In the 1990s, that occurred about 160 times per million words. But in the 2010s data set, it surged to 625 times per million.
It has essentially taken over. We also see massive structural shifts. Specifically, the tripling of the split infinitive.
Oh, a classic grammatical taboo.
Right, inserting an adverb between the word to and a verb. The famous Star Trek phrase, to boldly go, that's a split infinitive.
Right, because for decades, traditional educators demanded it be written as to go boldly.
Exactly. But the corpus reveals that modern speakers are overwhelmingly choosing to split the infinitive, constantly saying things like, to just go, or to actually get.
Okay, I have to genuinely push back on this on behalf of the grammar purists.
Go for it.
Because hearing that the sentence starting has quadrupled makes me cringe a little.
You're not alone in that.
If everyone starts throwing at the front of their thoughts or fracturing their verbs, isn't that just a degradation of communication? I mean, how can linguists look at that data and call it evolution instead of just a collective lazy habit?
Well, because descriptive linguists look at the function of the change, not the aesthetic.
Okay, explain that.
Take the split infinitive. There is a deep cognitive reason people prefer to boldly go. When you place the adverb immediately next to the verb, you tightly bind the modifier to the action in the listener's brain.
Interesting.
Saying to go boldly forces the listener to hear the action, wait a beat, and then retroactively apply the modifier.
Ah.
So splitting the infinitive is actually a more precise, immediate way of transferring an emotional concept.
Okay, I'll give you that. That makes sense for the verb. But what is the cognitive function of starting a sentence with like?
It functions as a crucial discourse marker. In spontaneous speech, putting like at the front of a sentence acts as a momentary buffer.
A buffer.
Yeah, it signals to the listener, I am about to summarize something, or I am translating a complex feeling into words. Give me a microsecond to load the thought.
Oh, wow.
It frames the upcoming sentence as subjective. The researchers behind the corpus strongly argue that language is simply a tool to transfer ideas.
Yeah.
If the vast majority of native speakers are modifying the tool to transfer ideas more efficiently, well, that modification becomes the new standard.
So teaching outdated, rigid rules that contradict how humans actually process information creates an artificial barrier.
Exactly.
Okay, the idea that casual English grammar is loosening up to become more emotionally precise is fascinating. But the sheer cognitive load of reading those subtle social cues takes a toll.
A massive toll.
Which becomes incredibly obvious when we look at our third batch of sources, high-stakes business English.
Yes.
Because the moment you walk into a corporate office or log onto a Zoom call, that casual descriptive freedom vanishes.
Completely vanishes.
The rules snap back, but they aren't textbook rules. They're unspoken psychological tripwires.
Business English is an entirely parallel linguistic ecosystem, and it is designed around risk mitigation.
It sounds exhausting.
It is. For a non-native speaker or someone entering corporate culture for the first time, it is an extreme psychological hurdle. Research indicates that non-native speakers can consume up to 80% of their cognitive bandwidth just decoding the chaotic, rapid-fire flow of a meeting.
80%. Just listening.
Yes. That leaves only a 20% reserve to formulate a strategic, intelligent response.
And virtual meetings multiply that anxiety.
Oh, without a doubt.
In a physical boardroom, a 5-second silence after a pitch feels contemplative. People are reading body language, looking at physical documents.
Right.
But on a Zoom call, where you lack ambient acoustic feedback, a 5-second silence feels like a catastrophic rejection. You instantly assume the client hates the idea or your internet router just died.
Exactly. And to survive that intense environment, linguists recommend a technique called shadowing.
What's that?
By actively listening and subtly mimicking the rhythmic pacing and specific vocabulary of the native speakers in the room, you build a phonetic muscle memory.
Ah,
But the true survival tactic, the one that separates mere participants from leaders, is mastering the architecture of hedging.
yes. This is where the language becomes pure diplomatic armor. It's not really about the definition of the words, it's about protecting egos.
Precisely. Consider the clash of cultural communication styles. In direct cultures, like the Netherlands or Germany, bluntness is equated with respect and efficiency.
Right.
If a project timeline is mathematically incorrect, a professional will simply state, your timeline is wrong. It's just an objective observation of the data.
But if you drop your timeline is wrong into a US or UK boardroom, it functions as a conversational grenade.
Total grenade. Because in those cultures, direct criticism shatters the required illusion of collaborative harmony.
Right, the recipient feels publicly attacked, their ego is bruised, and they instantly become defensive.
Which stalls the actual work.
Right.
So seasoned executives deploy hedging. Instead of your timeline is wrong, the required translation is, I'm not entirely sure the timeline is fully feasible given our current resources.
You are communicating the exact same rejection, but you are wrapping it in layers of cautious subjectivity.
Exactly.
I'm not entirely sure removes the objective finality. It's brilliant. And we see this exact same diplomatic framing when dealing with failure.
Oh, yes.
Our sources point out that you never sit in a boardroom and say, we failed. The emotional weight of the word failure triggers panic from the shareholders.
Right. Instead, the fluent corporate speaker says, we've hit a snag.
A nag.
We don't often think about the origins of our metaphors, but snag is a textile term. If a sweater catches on a stray nail, it's a snag.
Ah, right.
By utilizing that specific word, you are subconsciously telling the room that the problem is external, it's a minor surface tear, and most importantly, it can be easily untangled.
You project total calm control over the narrative.
Exactly.
Or if a project is disastrously behind schedule, you don't say, this is taking too long. You say, the integration phase is taking longer than anticipated.
Yes, using the word anticipated is a masterful linguistic trick.
How so?
It implies that you are a rational professional who builds forecasting models, and right now you are simply adjusting the model based on new data.
Wow. And beyond the hedging, you also have to decode the corporate jargon. Terms like synergy or leverage are often mocked, but they serve a very specific psychological function.
They do. They abstract messy human realities into sterile technical concepts.
Like the word bandwidth. When someone says, I don't have the bandwidth for this project, they aren't talking about the internet speed.
No, they're talking about their human cognitive capacity.
Right. It is so much safer to abstract your exhaustion into a technical limitation.
Because admitting I am too overwhelmed and tired to do this feels vulnerable and weak in a corporate setting.
Yeah.
Claiming a lack of bandwidth makes you sound like a server that is simply operating at maximum operational efficiency.
Exactly. Or the phrase, let's table that for now. It is a universally accepted, polite mechanism to completely shut down a colleague's tangent without telling them their idea is irrelevant.
Understanding these markers really transforms a chaotic meeting into a predictable narrative arc.
But maintaining that level of calculated corporate diplomacy for 8 hours a day is exhausting.
It's completely draining.
Which is exactly why, the second we leave the office, our language violently snaps back in the other direction. We drop the careful hedging and rely on hyper-visual emotional shorthand just to process our daily lives.
Which brings us to the colorful chaos of everyday logistical English and slang.
Right.
Once you are out of the boardroom, the linguistic requirements shift to navigating daily logistics and reinforcing social bonds. And because we are exhausted, we don't want to over-explain.
We want efficiency.
Exactly. We rely on highly specific situational vocabulary and deeply embedded cultural idioms to reduce friction.
Think about the logistical English of renting an apartment. We use legally binding terms like normal wear and tear to negotiate the return of a security deposit.
But normal wear and tear is entirely subjective.
Completely. It relies completely on a shared cultural assumption of what normal living looks like. It's a massive linguistic gray area that we all just casually accept.
Or consider the intensely complex social calculus of splitting a restaurant bill.
Oh, the social dance.
It is rarely just about the math. It is a delicate negotiation of social standing. We have developed highly specific scripts to navigate this without causing offense.
Like figuring out how to calculate a 20% tip before splitting the total.
Right, or the casual phrasing of, I'll put my card down, you all can just Venmo me. These aren't just logistical steps. They are rituals designed to prevent anyone from looking cheap or feeling taken advantage of.
And woven through all of these interactions is our reliance on idioms. When you actually stop and analyze the literal words of American idioms, they are incredibly dramatic.
Very dramatic.
We don't just say someone is hyperactive, we say they have ants in their pants. The imagery is visceral.
It really is. A lot of American idioms reveal the cultural baseline of competition and observation. For example, an armchair quarterback.
Oh, that's a great one.
It describes someone who constantly criticizes a situation from the sidelines without ever doing the actual work. It perfectly encapsulates the intersection of American sports culture and the frustration of dealing with unwarranted opinions.
We also use slang to create entirely new, hyper-specific emotional categories, like hangry.
Oh.
The glorious, undeniable fusion of being hungry and angry, it gives a name to a universal biological frustration.
And we also repurpose existing words like bail. The evolution of bail is a great example of emotional shorthand.
How so?
Well, if you are bailing out a business, you are rescuing them, usually with a massive injection of cash. The metaphor comes from bailing water out of a sinking boat to save it.
But if you text a friend and say, I have to bail on the party tonight, you are abruptly abandoning a social commitment.
Exactly. You're still using the sinking boat metaphor, but the context has completely flipped.
Right. You aren't saving the boat. You are saving yourself by jumping out of the boat because the party is a sinking ship.
And that is why we rely on these idioms. They might seem silly or chaotic compared to the rigid rules of a textbook, but they instantly build cultural camaraderie.
Yeah.
Would you use a shared bizarre idiom, like the drives me up the wall, to describe an annoyance? You don't have to explain the depths of your frustration.
The listener instantly understands the feeling of wanting to defy gravity just to escape a noise.
Right. It is an incredibly efficient transfer of empathy.
It really is. You know, it is genuinely incredible to step back and look at the sheer wingspan of the English language we've covered today.
That's massive.
We started by isolating the microscopic biomechanical placement of your tongue to create a flap T or a glottal stop. We explored how the cognitive desire for emotional precision is literally rewriting the grammar of our verbs.
The split infinitive.
Exactly. We unpacked the heavy diplomatic armor required to survive a corporate boardroom without bruising a colleague's ego. And we ended up looking at the visceral, dramatic imagery we use to navigate something as mundane as splitting a dinner bill.
And I think the ultimate takeaway here is recognizing your own agency in all of this. Language is not something that happens to you. It is something you are actively building.
That's a powerful way to look at it.
Every single time you speak, whether you are carefully deploying the word bandwidth in a meeting to protect your time, or you are relying on the word like to buffer a complicated thought with a friend, you are participating in the real-time evolution of this massive ecosystem.
You are shaping the code just as much as the code is shaping you.
Exactly.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating thought experiment to mull over. Think about the mindless throwaway slang or the filler words you use every single day with your friends.
Yeah.
Based on what we learned today about the researchers tracking our smartphone conversations and how rapidly descriptive linguistics become the new standard, what if the casual slang you invent today ends up becoming the strict foundational grammar rules taught in the textbooks of the 22nd century?
It's very possible.
Keep that in mind the next time you decide to split an infinitive. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.